Bernie Sanders, guy you might have heard of, a little bit of, running for president. Some people may have heard him. If you watch MSNBC or other mainstream media, maybe you haven't heard from him yet. So this is why we're here talking about this. Bernie Sanders is expected to pull in a massive $18 a time donations turnout. Let's just talk about it. Sanders leads the other Democratic primary contenders in terms of fundraising, having announced that he has garnered 4.86 million contributions with an average of $18 per donation, according to the New York Times. So we probably should fact check it, but it seems right now. In the fourth quarter alone, he has raised about $26 million, which is more than Joe Biden raised in his inaugural first quarter, and he has not been able to make that up since. But let's keep going, not about Joe. More than any of his rivals, the Times reported, were describing him as a financial pace setter in the 2020 contest. The paper also reported that this is far ahead of the 1.95 million donations of Pete Buttigieg and more than Joe Biden's estimated tally, whose campaign is hoping, keyword hoping, that his latest quarter will top 21.5 million that he raised last spring. So they're hoping. So there's no clear number, is basically what they're saying. So Biden could have gotten lower than that. He could have gotten more than that. But as of right now, we don't know. We just know that it's basically going to be lower than Sanders. Meanwhile, by midday in Eastern Time on Monday, there were more than 25,000 tweets with the hashtag President Sanders, a reflection of the optimism for Sanders' chances of winning both the primary and a head-to-head with President Donald Trump. Then continues that the electability issue is perhaps the chief reason for why Joe Biden is still leading in the national polls, even if the early states he is aggressive, increasingly vulnerable frontrunner, which we've talked about a number of times on the show. We're going to talk a little bit about that later, so I don't want to give it away right now. Jeet here wrote in The Nation, if Sanders is going to close a deal with Democratic voters, he needs to zero in on the electability issue, which, as we've said before, will probably get resolved when he wins or takes second place or a combination of that in the first 4 states. Paul, DCK Punk, what do you think?
Yes, we've been saying this kind of all along, and it's weird that Sanders is getting a little bit of extra sort of attention right now from mainstream press, and you're kind of getting it. It feels like like stuff is being thrown at the wall right now, and sort of seeing what sticks, and everything is still being framed in this. Joe Biden's got all this support, and that momentum's he might just carry him through. That's still kind of what they're like. Some of their thinking leans on. I don't know. It just, to me, seems very, there isn't a lot of policy that you can grab onto and be like, oh, this is a thing that people won't like about Sanders. It's like, no, whenever you talk about policy, that's what people like about him. And when you talk about donations and individual donor support, well, that's something he's going to win in spades. And so what you're seeing is all of these funky ways that campaigns are trying to look like Bernie Sanders or emulate Bernie Sanders, and look how small, what are, my average donations. Pete Buttigieg is like small. Please dollar.
Lower it now, please. Yeah. It's too high. It's $40. It needs to be lower than that. $1. Everyone put $1 in.
So I mean, he's the front runner, and everyone's trying to catch up. And I think this is what a little bit of the scramble looks like.
It's funny because you talk about electability. I believe Bernie Sanders is at 2 million individual donors now. I think the number is
way more than that.
No, 4 million donations. Yeah. I'm talking about individual donors, human beings pledging money to him. And generally speaking, if you're willing to put $20 on a candidate, you're probably going to vote for him. So when we talk about this electability issue, there's nobody even coming remotely close to how many individual donors, how many human beings have been like, that's my guy. I want to see him do good. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. So like this whole electability thing it's a farce.
Yeah.
It's obviously a farce. I just hate that the word electability itself is like, what is that? That's not a quantifiable thing. You're just using this weasel word to just mushyify all
malarkey.
Of it and be like, well, it's electability is my candidate. It's malarkey.
It's the establishment momentum. It's, if you could say,
it's malarkey.
Yeah, it is malarkey, but again, it's
I'm strongly against
politics
malarkey.
Is very much if enough people believe something to be true, it is. And that's how it is in politics. So if enough people believe that Joe Biden is electable, and Paul has pointed this out, I think it was yesterday we were talking about, there's just a number of Americans that are going to vote for who they perceive to be the winner, even though that perception drives who is the winner, which makes them easily determined by ideas of perception like that. So, yeah.
And I wanted to touch on one more thing. We were having a little bit of a conversation in the Discord today. Again, like when we talk about, Sanders' electability and things like that, of course, Medicare for all is always, the first and foremost thing. That's what you talk about when you talk about Sanders. And there's been a lot of conversation of, will he be able to pull it off? What's going to happen? And the understanding is that a Sanders election, if he becomes president, that will be the new political landscape. Medicare for all will be the answer because they're one and the same.
Yeah.
So this idea that, he'll never be able to pull it off even if he got elected, that's going to be a loud foghorn to the rest of the politicians in Congress and in the Senate that, well, that's where the people want. That's where the votes are going to go. And if he uses his bully pulpit, it'll be a cakewalk. It's easy for him to do.
It's actually kind of ironic if you really think about Trump. Trump has already proven that what you just said is
exactly
true. Because every Republican, whether they hated him in the primary, they all are lockstep with him now, because the second that they go in the other direction, they're taken out of office, they lose popularity, they're replaced by someone else. And we can expect a much more organized, consorted fashion directed around policy with Sanders in office than just tweets from Trump.
I think that's a very optimistic way of looking at it. I think with the Trump camp, that was allowed to happen very easily, right? As the Trump camp took over the Republican Party, because he plays to what the corporate class already wants. He plays to what the military industrial complex and pharmaceutical industry and Wall Street and all of that wants. They have no reason to oppose him, right? The argument against him was basically pearl clutching and, but we're going to have to, the constituencies that we're going to have to cater to are the xenophobes and these racists and blah, 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 blah. But at least he's given the tax breaks to the people that we want. And so now if Bernie gets in there, he's not going to have any of the support of any of the corporate class or any of the military industrial complex class. And you're just having people bend over backwards to be like, well, he's racist, I guess, somehow.
Well, this goes back to what John was saying, something I've been saying the entire election, that the way Sanders has run his campaign as a movement campaign, by him winning the election, already fighting all these corporatists, all the establishment Democrats, it means he already has big army diplomacy. By definition, if he gets in with all the establishment doing everything they can, very similar to Trump, trying to stop him from doing so, the second he gets in, it means that he already is stronger.
I'm saying that army is more than just the Democratic Party. That army exists in both parties.
Well, I'm saying that that army will already be fighting in the primary and the election right now.
Fair enough.
Senators and I'll stop after this. Senators and congressmen, they have to please two fronts. Unfortunately, the way our democracy is set up, they still have to please two fronts. They have to say the pandering quotes and fool the people into thinking that they're doing what the people want while pleasing the donor class right now. With a Sanders campaign and a Sanders push in that bully pulpit, they're going to have to worry a lot more about the people than they ever have before. Mm-hmm. That was the thing, with the Trump presidency, all you got to do is smile and wave and do the dance. It's not going to work that way moving forward if we get a bigger progressive coalition in office.
Exactly.